Okay, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Larkspur Parks and Recreation Commission. Today is Thursday, February 20th, 2025, and the time's about 6:32. Director Stone, if you can do the roll call for us, please.
Yes. Commissioner Sunshine?
Here.
Commissioner Friedel?
Here.
Vice Chair Harrison?
Here.
And Chair Capel?
Here.
Let the record show that Commissioner Baxter is absent tonight.
Duly noted. All right, we're gonna move on to item number 2, which is public comment. I'll just read quickly. The Parks and Recreation Commission will hear public comments only on matters over which they have jurisdiction. There will be no commission discussion. The chair will allot no more than 5 minutes to any individual. Unless the chair determines otherwise, the total amount of time allocated to this agenda item will be 15 minutes. At this point, we'll open up to public comment. Is there anyone here in the meeting itself or online that would like to make any public comment?
Nobody online.
And no one in the audience?
Oh, no, I'm a different item.
Because our artist,
Oh, okay.
illustrator, yeah.
All right. We are gonna move on, since there's no public comment, to item number 3, which is the approval of the consent calendar. Just want to make sure. We have enough of,
I'll have to
The
recuse
people-
myself. I was not there.
Yeah, we do not have enough
Yeah.
here to pass this
Okay.
tonight, so we'll save
and we
this
will,
for the next
we'll
one.
table that till next month. It's a very sad moment for me, but we're gonna move on to item number 4, business items. 4.1, the installation of officers. Director Stone, you want to lead us through this item?
Yeah, so this is a time, usually the Park and Rec Commission kind of rotates chairs. So the next chairs are current would, if the commission chooses, would be Vice Chair Harrison, and then next up would be Commissioner Baxter as the Vice Chair, if we were to follow history with this.
Okay,
And so you would just somebody would want to make a motion to do that.
right. Do any of the commissioners would like to make a motion about this? Or any discussion, or just right to the motion?
I would make a motion that we, install Commissioner Harrison as the chair and Commissioner Baxter as vice chair. I'll say it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All
Should
right.
we roll call?
No, motion passes.
Motion passes.
There you go.
And with that, I'm going to hand the gavel over to my newly installed commissioner, chair.
We have to move? Yeah.
This is it.
And it has to happen now.
Just like that, just like that, just like that, the power shifts, yes. Peaceful transfer of power. Imagine that.
Yeah. And I want you to know, it's very exciting because the last time that I was chair, it was during COVID and we only had Zoom meetings. And I never actually got the gavel.
You have the gavel.
No, it is very exciting.
Your first gavel.
My first gavel.
It's official.
There you go.
All right. Well, thank you, commissioners, for the confidence that you are showing. And both myself and Commissioner Baxter.
We are in good hands.
I would say we should move on then to item 4.2, which is the public art policy, and I think everybody has a copy of that in front of them.
Yeah, so for this item, I'd like to introduce Assistant City Manager Shannon O'Hara.
Good evening, commissioners, no members of the public here tonight, maybe people of the future who are watching the video. My name is Shannon O'Hara and I'm the Assistant City Manager for the City of Larkspur. I have a very brief staff report for you this evening, and then we'll open it up to questions, and as many questions as we have, we can really make this a two-way conversation at this point. So I just want to have a brief recap because we're all very busy folks. Why are we bringing a potential public arts policy to you this evening? Larkspur supports a sense of community. Public art can add to the beauty and vibrancy of the community, create a sense of place, contribute to economic development. There's been recent interest in public art, which staff believes necessitates the creation of a formalized policy to provide guidance. And after reviewing 40 public art policies, staff developed the one that was brought to council for consideration at the meeting in September. At that time, we presented it to the commission and we received a number of points of feedback, which staff brought back for edits and also addressed with the city attorney's office how to best incorporate those edits. So there's two. Excuse me. There's one major change to the public art policy that you'll notice that incorporated when we reviewed the video, reviewed the notes, incorporates the two major things that the commission asked for amendment. So one was that the policy more clearly spell out that the city retains rights for promotion of the policy of any public art that's displayed in the city or including being able to publicize on our social media channels, on any pieces of I'm so sorry, on any promotional materials, etc., as well as there were some concerns about the maintenance requirements in the public art policy. Specifically to include provisions to say that you should keep the public art looking as good as it can. So remove spider webs, remove cobwebs, remove any infestations, etc. When we discussed with the city attorney, with the feedback the commission had, the city attorney's office actually recommended that a lot of those provisions were moved into the actual exhibit or MOU agreement between the city and the artist. So there were a couple of things there. When we discussed this, the original public art policy was largely, we reviewed 20 policies, but a lot of the language was taken from the city of Healdsburg, which their model was to include it in the policy itself, which is a fine way to do it. Our city attorney said that a lot of these concerns you want to address on a project by project basis and actually have it live in the contract. So it's referenced there now. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is because in theory and probably in practice, each piece of public art might look very different, right? Something might be a projection on the side of a building. Another thing might be a sculpture. Something else might be a painting that's displayed inside a public building. So to have something a little bit more bespoke that addresses what the art looks like, that's just included right in the agreement. So if you have maintenance requirements, you put it in there. If it's something that's prone to cobwebs that you think would make it look really bad, you put that in the artist agreement to have that maintenance requirement. If there's, as social media and as promotion evolves, to actually have something in there as like an attachment or an addendum or in the agreement about how we would promote that in the community and what we want at that specific time. And that's a way not only to be mindful of it when you have each project, clearly communicate expectations between the artist and the city, but also make sure that each time this would be brought before the community, that it really reflects what that piece is rather than having something boilerplate, which then may be open to interpretation if you don't include it into the document. So that was the approach that was taken and that was recommended. So what is in the staff report is completely redlined. So you reviewed in September a version of it. I've included all the track changes. So you're like, okay, what exactly was changed? Everything that's changed is in the redline document. So it doesn't look the greatest now, but we are able to address anything where if you've reviewed the packet and have any questions about what staff did between the last time we discussed and this time we discussed, I'm happy to address that. And that's pretty much the end of the presentation. I'd like to open up the discussion if there's any questions. The next steps would be if we decide we want to move forward with a public art policy, if there's minor changes, or I don't want to say simple changes, but very clear changes that staff can incorporate. Further changes, we'll bring them back. And we think that the best opportunity to do this would be at the March 5th joint meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission and the meeting of the City Council, because this will ultimately go to council for consideration. And that venue will allow the council to also discuss with the commission all of these provisions, etc. Particularly what the role of the commission would be, because one of the key things that's unchanged from last time, but this widens the scope of the commission and the responsibilities. So the Parks and Recreation Commission would essentially become the Parks, Recreation and Arts Commission to review public art. And so we can, if we move forward at that time, it could be a discussion with the council about it. We can receive further feedback. And then if we want to move forward, adopt a public art policy, we would have to amend the municipal code to reflect the increased powers of the commission, which will be, I suspect, a procedural exercise for staff in the community. So with that, are there any questions?
Anyone?
So I pulled it when I read it. And I don't remember where I read it, but, so you're asking them to hold insurance, liability insurance, the artist?
Correct.
Is it somewhere in there too that they hold the city and the commission harmless?
The hold harmless?
Like the whole harmless?
There is that language. If you don't mind, I'm gonna open up my
Sure,
laptop
no,
because
no,
I'm a big
I
fan of
remember
Control
I
F
see-
at times when we're looking at a technical document.
Right, sorry, and I remember seeing, I see it in here now that they have to have their policy, but I can't see, and I thought I did see where they also hold the city and the commission and city employees, yada, 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 whole times as well. Is
That's
that in
it.
there?
That's a lot. I
Down there as
believe
well?
it's referenced, and sometimes within the insurance documents, the hold
Okay.
harmless language would be part of that whole document.
So they have insurance and then it also then holds the city harmless as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And for anyone who might be watching this in the future, et cetera, the hold harmless agreement addresses the risk management and city liability. So. That's what it speaks to.
That was the question.
Okay.
Other questions?
I have some questions.
Great.
And just begin by asking a general question to you. You looked at 40 different municipalities and what type of agreement they have in place. I'd imagine some are pretty simple and some are more complex, more contractual, a lot more legalese. Like, where does this fall if there was a scale from?
I didn't have the scoreboard, so we looked at, I was looking for everything I could, and then we narrowed it down to 20 that the criteria was, they were California. They were cities that were similar-ish in size to Larkspur, so we didn't look at city and county of San Francisco as a draft policy because that's probably a little bit robust for us in terms of all of the public art that's in the city and county of San Francisco. Where we fall, and then the other thing was that I looked at policies that were recent and seemed to be living, breathing documents. So anything that I found online from 1993, I was like, there's probably other examples that might be a little more recent and have had eyes on them in the past decade plus. Where we are in terms of, I'm sorry for your question of, in terms of how robust it is, or in terms of how strictly we regulate as a city, or what scale?
Complexity. I
Oh,
guess.
complexity?
Simplicity, one page, just.
Yeah.
It's.
I
pretty
don't
simple.
have that information handy. I will say that, we're probably right in the middle. So this is probably pretty standard.
Mhm.
There are some cities that, yes, it's like more than one page, it ends up in the contract, right? And that's kind of a philosophy and a practice around staff. And then you run across policies where they are like 30, 40 pages, right? They're essentially books. This one is, again, without reviewing all of them in front of me, this would probably be somewhere in the middle. And in terms of, and pretty standard, I would say, within a page,
Okay,
yeah.
so the reason why I ask is I look at this document and I wonder if artists coming to the city of Larkspur might not be overwhelmed with some of the requirements and just, not that familiar with the contracts of this nature, if that's gonna scare them away.
Yeah.
And do you have any thoughts on that?
So I haven't talked directly with any artist at this point, right? So I do know that when you look at the research, when I looked at other staff reports and I looked at news headlines of things that had gone great with public art and maybe some cautionary tales, especially for large installations, it's a certain kind of artist that's drawn to public art, right? And that's all kinds of things, right? Some of that is ego. You want your art in the public, it's medium, it's funding, right? And it's materials used. So I mentioned projections on the side of a building, right, that can work in a public space, or really durable materials. I don't want to speak for all public art, but maybe if you're working in paper mache or some really kind of fine, you know, fine, delicate material, public art is not your thing unless it's inside a building. I do not think that relative to other cities, this would scare artists away more than other jurisdictions to where they look somewhere else. I do think it's a fair point and something that staff could provide a presentation on after a policy is adopted, et cetera, of how we can do communications materials, how we can talk to other jurisdictions about how we might attract artists and be open to working collaboratively with folks, because that's so much of city business, right? It's not only the regulations, but it's how staff interacts. Do you come from a place where you throw a lot of papers at folks and expect them to fill it out? Or do you come up from a place where you're marketing, we want to be your center for public art, work with us, et cetera, and kind of the collaborative approach to staff. Does that answer the question?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just
I'll-
wanna make sure I was-
Also, this is redlined, half of these pages are gonna go away.
Yeah, I get that,
Yeah.
but it's still like a 19-page.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a lot, but I can tell you, I spent 17 years at the Sausalito Art Festival.
Mhm.
And I would give stacks of stuff like this to the artists to show. And those are professional artists, and yeah, there would be some pushback, but they would sit down and fill the paperwork out.
Okay,
And
So I
some
mean-
of this too, for folks, and again, I'm not an artist, okay, I'm not creative. But some of this too is in the best interest of the artist, for the artist to retain rights and retain promotion. So although it could be intimidating if you just were really activated and inspired to put something beautiful in Larkspur, there's also things in here that are in the artist's best interests.
sure.
Well,
Are you done? You have some questions? I'm not gonna be, you have no questions.
I have some more, but go
No,
ahead.
no, no,
No,
no, no.
well, go ahead, because most of, I'm gonna go through and I have some,
You're all right. So in Park and Rec, if you have a question, Park and Recreation, you have a question, you go to Director Stone. Who's gonna be the city person for this? Is that gonna fall on Mr. Stone as well?
So.
Like to Commissioner's point, if they have questions about this 19-page document, who at the city is going to answer those questions? Who's going to be the city counterpoint to this?
Yeah, so we can also, what didn't remain changed more or less, that's also an attachment in the staff report, is the flow chart. Because this is a document where it's hard to
Yeah.
visualize what exactly goes on. So under the steps, there's the offer of public artwork, the documentation for offer. Some of that in terms of a lot of questions, et cetera. The first step is it's forwarded to the relevant city departments and the Parks and Recreation Commission. So it'll depend on where you want to put it in town, right? Like who you might talk to on staff. As well as the written offer itself. Right now, it's the office of the city manager.
So they're gonna go to Dan's office. city
Go to
manager's
Dan's office.
And get this application.
And then it would be on staff
to decide.
to look at the application and say,
So
is this
Allison-
in a public, right? If it's in one of our public parks, the recreation director would be involved. The public works director would be involved for maintenance concerns, et cetera. You know, if it's in a historic district or something, maybe we would get the community development department involved. At the new library, if it's around the new library, the library would be involved. So staff would distribute to who we would think it would need to go to, so that the artist would have enough information about how this would look like if they wanted to move forward.
So but to Commissioner Capel's point, who helps them if they have questions initially to fill the application out or this packet? Allison, City Park is gonna be the person who's gonna help them fill this packet out?
We'll get there when we get there, when we get an application. I suspect what it would be the first step.
Cause that's, she's the.
This has
face,
been
right?
assigned to me as my project. I would be the person who would do the initial review of this. And then depending on what questions they had or what kind of assistance they needed, I would refer them, I would either ask the appropriate department or refer to the appropriate department. Also, I suspect that, I hope, because we're not creating a public art policy if we don't want any public art in our community. If we get soft inquiries before someone has an application and they just want to talk to the city manager's office. And then we would, if they want to talk to someone else on staff about, I think this is would be really great to put in Piper Park, talk to the recreation director about what kind of other programming we have there, et cetera. A lot of these things before you fill out all of the paperwork and move forward are conversations to just information gather. So, and there's nothing in this policy that precludes that.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'd like to just go through some of the notes I
Yep.
made from the document. In the policy itself, this is, I think, under, item 4, review of officers and public artwork. I did notice that there's the word approve or approved, approval, several times. And I might have mentioned this earlier when we went through an earlier draft, so apologies if we've already covered this and made the final determination, but generally speaking, this commission doesn't usually approve much of anything. You know, we're more of we recommend to the city council. So this would be a little bit of a departure. And I just want to make sure that that's been, since it would be such a change for us to actually have the approval authority. Just want to make sure that that's been, you know, sent up the flagpole and blessed before we move forward with our own recommendation.
So, in terms of initial feedback, there hasn't been a meeting of the whole city council convened around this. But it's been, it was a recommendation of council members who've been interested in us creating a public art policy that the Parks and Recreation Commission would be the appropriate venue for that. Because of the mission of the Parks and Recreation Commission. If you look in other cities, again, there's a city that does something differently somewhere, so there's an example that counters this. But it's not uncommon to have a standalone arts commission. And rather than create a new commission, the idea would be, we have a great Parks and Rec Commission who's really involved in how do we make our community a vibrant place, et cetera. This would be a really appropriate venue. So in that sense, it's been vetted. At the last time, unless I misheard something, et cetera, it seemed like if there was consensus or near consensus among the commission that there was interest in the commission in taking on this responsibility, right? So that's part of why staff is here before you, because we don't take something and say, you're now in the arts business. Do you want to do this? So I got the sense last time that there was some enthusiasm or at least okayness around that, because that's another part of it, right? Staff definitely doesn't want to bring something and bring additional responsibilities to a commission if there's not interest there, if the commission doesn't feel like it's a good fit.
Right, just to clarify, I'm not questioning whether the Parks and Rec
Okay.
is interested, is the right authority. It's really just the way in which we generally conduct our business. And
Yeah.
it's typically, we recommend and then the city council approves. Whereas in this document, we're the one approving. And so I just want to make sure that
That will
that is
be,
something that's been considered.
right, so that will be something that in the presentation at the joint meeting will be brought before the council, because the council, per law, per the Brown Act, which I bring up all the time, is not allowed to discuss this as a body unless it's in a public venue. It's a good law that exists for a lot of reasons. So I don't know what each individual council member will say, what the council member will say as a legislative body. But in terms of us talking to individual council members, talking amongst staff, and then there hasn't been a big community outreach effort around this at this point about who should do this. But there's a sense that this is a model that will work where
Right.
the commission is the deciding.
Right. And I'm not questioning whether we should have that authority, that approval authority. I just want to make sure that it's been considered and that everyone is on board with it.
Yeah, it'll be a discussion at the joint meeting, and that's notable. A lot of times it's the commission, and then if something's appealed or a final decision, it goes before the city council, and this is a departure from that. So that's a point well taken. But it
Okay.
was an intentional setup. Or
Um,
intentional design.
All right, so I'm just gonna go through some other little questions I have as I went through the document. I noticed it's still in that same section, 4, towards the end, there's this, heading, community engagement requirements.
Yeah.
And it discusses, second sentence, at least 2 public meetings must be held as part of the review process. But then, if you turn to the next page, under community engagement, it talks about long-term projects, and it says a minimum of 1 public meeting and 3 letters of support are recommended. And I'm just wondering if that is something that needs to be fixed, if I'm reading that incorrectly, if to me, it's not consistent. You know, one versus 2.
Give me a second. That might be an inconsistency that was lost in the track changes. Let me make sure. The community engagement requirements were changed slightly by legal. Then where is the?
Can I tell you my interpretation of
Yeah.
that? Because I got the same thing. I thought the 2 public meetings under the community engagement requirements for the two, there needed to be two rec, park and arts this kind of public meeting
Uh-huh.
for the approval process, but to get to the approval planning, through the approval planning process, I thought the minimum of one public meeting was more of a community meeting requirement versus so maybe it's the difference between a public hearing and a public meeting. But that was just, Shannon, that was my interpretation, but I caught the same inconsistency, and that's how I read that.
So this is an inconsistent, the way I'm reading this is an inconsistency in the document. So this would be a good opportunity. It was staff's, recommendation to just move it to two meetings and not have the bifurcated long-term installations versus short-term installation. If the commission prefers the language that was left over, I don't feel strongly about that either way. That was one of the things that was simplified to just keep it across projects. And this language that is on page, under section 5 was, I think, supposed to be redlined, striked out.
Okay, so you'll clean that up one way or the other, I take it.
Is there a preference on the commission of one way or the other before staff moves forward?
Anyone?
You're asking if we think we need two meetings?
Two versus one.
I mean, if we approve a project, we approve it. I don't know why we would need to schedule two unless we ask them to come back with additional information. Sometimes we'll say, if you can come back, like we did with this recently, we did with, I want to say pickleball and tennis, we said, can you come back with additional information? And we asked them to come back. So unless we need additional clarification, why would we need two meetings to make a decision? Would be my point.
The two meetings is, that point is really well taken. A lot of times the two meetings, especially because we haven't got, it was in the previous presentation, but wasn't in this one. Public art can be controversial. Even if the subject matter isn't controversial to some people, like, I like the way it was before. Why am I looking at a piece of art now when I had a view of whatever? The idea what it would be, if people couldn't attend one meeting, that they could attend the other meeting, or the other thing is sometimes once there's one public meeting or community meeting about something, word gets around, and then additional folks are alerted to a project, et cetera, which is,
But then that becomes more of a reading, a first reading and
Yeah.
a vote. So then it becomes more of a
Yeah.
council situation. So it's not really two meetings. It's a reading where they know there's not gonna be a decision. So should we clarify that then? Are we then looking at?
I'm just looking at when, under, let's continue and let me read this again to make sure that I'm speaking to this correctly.
I wouldn't think we need two meetings to make a decision unless, I think that's a really valid point you're saying.
Oh, we're under section 4. I'm so sorry, folks. So yes, the reading is correct that it's two. Okay, so this is two meetings of, as part of the review process, and it's under the Parks and Recreation Commission. And then the part below is just community meetings.
So the one would be a reading where they would present it and there could be public comment, and then the second one would be. the
Yeah, and those would be
vote.
two meetings of the commission.
That would allow should there be.
Yeah.
Public comment, because we have some. And then. The second one would be, so the first one would not entail a vote.
It would be, so the
It
second
would be
meeting
a reading, like.
Yeah, it would be a
council.
presentation. Yeah.
And that in addition to the minimum of one public meeting with HOAs or.
Yep.
So you're having, maybe have them both be called public meetings, maybe one is a community. I think that's what the confusion
Yeah,
is.
change
We're
the
calling them
type
all,
of meeting, yeah.
I will, so.
I mean, they're all public meetings.
No, but I
There is.
think some, cause even the person who went over this, like very recently was a little bit confused. I think some clarifying language
Yeah,
at their meetings of the Parks and Recreation Commission, and then, also I will, when we review this again, I think even
Well,
under
it's
the
only-
review, it's not complete, it doesn't necessarily look like it's presented in chronological
And that would
order.
only be if a reading meeting and a voting meeting would only be necessary if council decides, we would be the voting body.
Right.
To Commissioner Capel's point, we often don't vote, we recommend. So if if council isn't going to give us that authority, we don't need a second meeting, we would just have a reading and then we make a recommendation.
And then it would,
that
and the second meeting would
would be-
actually be the council meeting,
would be my
because,
understanding.
I mean, this says 2 public meetings.
One to be us. and
One could be a park commission meeting and the other could be a council meeting, or it could also be,
Second meeting of the Parks and Rec.
Right, depending. I
depending.
mean, they could have, then it could, maybe you don't need a number. Because what if we have a presentation, a reading meeting, and then we ask for clarification or ask for secondary reading, or there's so many comments, we have to have a second meeting before we even if we end up not having voting rights. Then before we even make a recommendation, we can have 2 meetings before it even gets to council. Why are we defining the number of meetings?
I do think some of the idea of defining the number of meetings, et cetera, is actually to not intimidate artists. To think that you'll be in a, to say that, set expectations, right? Like you're gonna have to go through these meetings. You can't just put up, you can't just put up art without a public engagement process. And then to also set some standards there. So if, if they're
Minimal,
dedicating a
yeah.
bunch of time to this project that they don't think that, they'll have 15 meetings. And again, in our community, we're actually pretty quick by government standards. If you look around at other agencies, other jurisdictions, et cetera, it can take years to get things through different, legislative bodies, approval processes, et cetera. So I, that's part of the intent behind that.
Because there are different kinds of public meetings, is the intent here that it be, if we do agree that there needs to be 2 meetings, is the intent that those are meetings of the Parks and Rec Commission?
The 2 public meetings are meetings of the Park and Rec Commission, because
Okay.
that's under that section. And then these other ones, it has the short-term, long-term, and then it talked about the letter recommendation specifically if you're in HOA territory, et cetera. And again, that's to get community buy-in, to get any feedback, both to, I don't want to say improve the project, right, but to make the project as successful it is, and then also get a sense of if there's going to be any major concerns, or I don't want to say backlash, but not, community will not support the public art being there, to provide some additional data points rather than just vibes of this will probably be great, or someone, someone loves this, someone says that they wouldn't. There's some additional pieces there. Thanks for bringing that to staff attention.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Does another, just above that community engagement, the paragraph above funding, the last sentence says, the city does not provide project funding for public art. But then in the attachment, there's, plenty of discussion of what we're gonna pay. And I'm just wondering is this another inconsistency, or am I just reading this incorrectly?
In the attachment in the exhibit A.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could
Attachment-
change the language to firm that up. So this actually, it may be vague, but it's not an inconsistency, because some cities and art commissions particularly, there is actually a fund for public art where every amount of time, let's say it's annually or fiscal year,
Right.
you want to spend X amount of money on public art, or at least have a policy process where you get so much money and then commission a piece, and it'll be in development fees that it goes to public art. Those are all things that are in play, particularly in larger jurisdictions.
Mhm.
And that's what that's speaking to, is that there's no dedicated fund, and there will be no like public art program. Like
Right.
if you Google public art policy versus public art programs, there are 2 different things. I can appreciate that might be a little bit vague, and that an additional sentence of clarification.
Or maybe you can just read, the city does not set aside project funding for public art. Something as simple as that.
Yeah, we probably won't use project funding. I know that was my example, but we also don't provide general plan, we don't do general budget general fund funding for public art. There's no specifics. There's other ways to fund it, right? Like you could just put aside, or I don't say just put aside, sales tax could be another thing that would be put aside for public art. A certain amount out of the general fund established by policy of the city council could also be another way to fund public art. At this point in time, that's not a discussion of the city of Larkspur to set aside any kind of dedicated funds to
Right.
pay artists for public art.
Yeah, I think if
Yeah,
that one sentence can be wordsmithed a little bit, that
Yeah.
would probably
Yep.
be much, more clearer. I'm just reading my notes here, and one of the questions I asked is, does the city own the art? Or is it, are we just contracting to display the art for a certain amount of time? When we, we're paying, but there's no ownership of the art itself, correct?
In the policy, there's provisions in there that can speak to the purchase of it, et cetera, but in these programs, and generally the way it works is public art, if it's a short-term installation, et cetera, the artist retains ownership of the actual piece of art.
Mhm, okay.
Is there a page that I know you would have.
Well,
the pages
I mean, I wrote it
here.
down, just, as I was reading along, it was, section, I guess, section 4 and 5, that's why I wrote the note down, but I'm not exactly sure. It might be that after all the discussion of total payment, I'm just kind of questioning, like, oh, do we own it, or do we not own it? Is it just a matter of we're just paying for the installation to show it? So,
Okay,
that was a general comment. Under section 10, I'm just kind of, the city intends to display the work as originally created by artists in Exhibit A and to maintain the work in good condition. I think we've kind of already discussed this earlier. So I'm just gonna move on from that. I think I only have one more, I just gotta find it. A lot of paper. Oh, this is a very minor thing, but, under section 19, this is page 18 of 19.
yeah,
Item 19.2, it references the county of Sonoma. I'm taking that just a clerical. That
that's
should be-
clerical,
that should be
we'll
removed.
fix that, that's clerical.
And other than that, that's, the extent of my, notes.
Thank you.
Hmm.
That's very helpful and very thorough. Any other questions? Comments, thoughts?
Okay, so before we conclude, since we have a little bit of time, et cetera, I won't take too much longer, but it's my intention to bring not the exact, same presentation, but to provide something that's more similar to the September presentation I did to the commission so that the city council can also hear this. So we'll go through the whole staff presentation about why we have public art, what the exact sections are, et cetera. And then move into the discussion where I intend to leave some time between the two legislative, but between the commission and the council to be able to talk to each other about any changes or how it might work, concerns, et cetera, and if anything should be amended further on a policy level or on a design level. Does that sound like it makes sense for March 5th when we all see each other again?
Yeah.
All right. Great, so with that concludes my item of presentation, unless there's anything additional.
Nothing? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Look forward to the discussion. All right, we will move to our next business item, 4.3, which is the educational signage at Piper Park. And I believe we have
Yes. Thank
the
you.
artist here, Emma.
Yes, Emma Oil is here and let me just pull some info really quickly. So, in June of last year, we met and talked about doing some educational signage at Piper Park. And together, we brainstormed ideas for these educational panels and kind of came up with 5 different themes that we wanted to focus on. And these are the drafts that you guys are now seeing. These are what we're hoping for, pretty close to final. And we're hoping from this point, the next step would be to colorize these panels before approval for printing. So what I will have Emma, the artist, go over these slides with you right now, and you guys can ask questions as you like.
Just as a quick note, the think of this as sort of like a clean sketch, as if I were working with pencil, and the next step would be to digitally ink and put color into them, like was already said. So the composition is pretty much set, with the exception of the logos and the artist attribution. We're still playing around with that, so if you guys have a specific recommendation for that, of course. I believe we're changing the Larkspur logo to
Yes, we're gonna change to a city
the
seal
city seal.
and the measure A, if you can see on the top right, we're gonna enlarge that a bit and standardize it. It's as you know, the measure A is the county measure that funds projects for parks.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right, so this first composition that we're looking at is the Piper Park then and now timeline, covering a little bit about the history of Coast Miwok and how they would have utilized the resources in and around Piper Park, mainly the creek and the saltwater marsh there. Discussing how the area became more industrialized and the establishment of the park. Just let me know if you guys have any questions or anything that you think would need to be revised on any of these.
Maybe we could go through all five of them?
Yeah.
and then kind of go back.
Go back, okay, yeah,
That is perfectly
that's
fine.
a great idea,
All right, so
Gives us the sense of the.
yeah.
this second one is about Mount Tamalpais. It talks a little bit about the history of the area, the etymology of Mount Tamalpais, the geology as well. Then, number 3, is the discussion about the important role of the tides in the ecology of the saltwater marsh. It talked about the different zones, which are stratified based on how often high tide reaches them. We've got the 4th one, which is our biodiversity panel. With lots of fun critters and plants that you can find in and around the marsh. And then our final one is the food web and migratory birds panel. We have decided to leave a preliminary color in with the arrows, just to make it a little bit easier to understand what is happening in these panels. Those are not the final colors. And the migratory species in here is our male northern shoveler in the bottom right-hand corner. And also, I discovered that the California endemic dusky-footed wood rat can be found in Corte Madera Marsh. So we've got that little guy
there he
hanging
is.
out there too.
There it is. There's a lot of information on each one of these. No, I was just going to ask what kind of feedback you would like from us.
Yeah, if there's any information that you guys think is particularly pertinent that didn't get added, if any of the compositions feel a little funky or displeasing, if you would like something moved left or right, if you have any specific recommendations moving forward, like for background color, or if anything, any particular element is too detailed or not detailed enough and you think doesn't fit with the composition. And just any questions about why we decided or didn't decide to include any information.
Okay.
How big are the signposts gonna be? What's the,
Do you remember off the top of your head,
I think
the
it's something like 18 by 20
little
something.
bit bigger. Let me look that up really quick.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, I think they're roughly 2 feet by 3 feet.
And I'll keep on going just because I just wanted to kind of get a sense. First of all, these are so beautiful,
They are.
even without the color. They just really move me the way you've got the animals and the fish and it's just so like it reminds me of one of those Richard Scarry books where you just kind of want to look at all the little pieces of it. So thank you so much from, you know, the first presentation we made months ago. So I have no like content or I'm sure it's very well thoroughly researched. But I did have a question about your decision. And you've got beautiful handwriting, but your
Yeah.
decision on the handwriting only because I'm concerned about legibility.
Oh, pardon me, if
And-
that wasn't made clear, that is just so we could start seeing how the words would fit into the composition. My plan is to put together what's called a provisional style guide
Oh,
for Nick and Rita to review with some of the wording in actual, Adobe Suite fonts. This is just.
okay. I mean, it's so
placeholders right now.
beautiful
Just a
like
draft,
this.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but, and
I wouldn't
I
have
understand,
initially
but
first,
I
yeah.
just know, this, many generations, we just don't read cursive anymore, and so I wanted to make sure it was legible so people could read through. So it's gonna be a type font.
Yes.
Okay, great. Super helpful, because I think people are gonna wanna spend a lot of time
Mm-hmm.
kind of putting it all together. That's fantastic. That was my major question. And I'm assuming when you put it into type font, you can also do a final spell check and all that kind of stuff. I did see a couple of, yeah. Okay. And that, I think it's fantastic. I mean, I'm curious on like, where does your heart go in terms of the coloring of, do you see it as kind of pastels or vibrant colors? Where do you?
Well, I think that at least for the plants and animals, my best recommendation would be to do them as true to life as is possible. With the digital illustration, that's really helpful with representing the organisms the way that they are. In a past project, the council, it was a council, not a commission, decided to have the same background color for all of the panels I did for them to make them more cohesive. And that would be something you guys could make a decision on if you want the same background color or if you want the background color to be specific to each panel and the colors within.
Yeah, thank you. This is fantastic.
I have a couple of questions. You made the commissioner made a point. I wouldn't know if this was correct or not. But I'm assuming you've done the historical and scientific research to make sure that this is in fact correct, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't know.
So, for the history of private park, I actually used the, what's the name of the book?
The Larkspur past and present.
Oh,
So that was the source of most of the information on the historical panel. And then, yeah, all of the other information, the geology is pulled out of a California natural history book from the library. And then the plant and animal species, are from the publicly available data on, a website called iNaturalist.
That would be my advice, because I wouldn't know what I was looking for or not. And then, these are gonna be mounted how, like, do we have a visual of what it's gonna look like? Because sometimes you put these beautiful pieces of work up and you see like an ugly post and a nail behind it, like, how are they gonna sit? How are they gonna be?
Sorry, I do
spaced?
not have a photo of the one that's currently up at Piper Park, but it's just past the garden and it's two
yeah.
4x4 posts that
That's
come
the
up
one,
and it's
okay.
at a 30-degree angle and it's just kind of a very clean
Those are beautiful. I don't want them to be. I'd rather
all
not see
weather
them.
board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't wanna see how the sausage is made, sort of situation. And then two more quick questions. One is, I was at this meeting the other day and the whole room went quiet because there was this interesting fact brought out about something and everyone was like, oh. So I was just wondering if there was like on each of these, if there was like one interesting fact that people would go, oh my God. I mean, all of it's interesting, but just my weird point, because I think it's beautiful. I couldn't do anything like this if I even sat down and think about this beautiful work. So that was just my weird thought, just because I had that meeting where everyone, it was about the Marin Veterans Theater, it's a weird side story. And then, I know, this is weird moment. Anyway, so if there was like a specialty fact about each one of these that people could take away, that was like the most important fact on each one or something, I don't know if that even comes true, that was just the way my mind went on these. And then when these go in, the other side of my brain, it always thinks of the way to promote it. Could we do a special unveiling all 5 of them, a scavenger hunt to find them? Tell me, you know, on the Pepper Park now and then, tell me what happened in the 1850s, and have the kids come around and, you know, like a bingo card or whatever that looks like to really promote that these have been installed and, or something kind of next, like, great. something
A
else that I
scavenger
have to
hunt
do.
type thing.
You know, to go on
Yeah.
all the signs and tell me something that's on each sign and bring it back for, whatever, or
Yeah, I
whatever
think,
that looks like to
I think
really.
the goal
promote
for
it.
us was to do a ribbon cutting of sorts, and if we could incorporate some kind of game that might get more of the kids
You
and.
know, send them to look, find
Yeah.
something on each of these, you know, signs. You know, how many birds are on the 5th sign or whatever, to really make people go look at it or drop them in and,
It's a great idea to incorporate in the opening.
you
Yeah.
know, something fun to really announce that they're there. So that people really look at them, so they get.
Yeah, and I would definitely be available for, any event you guys wanted to.
Definitely.
And then, if there's time, going back to your question about if there's any one fact that stands out. One of the things that I love most about public education is that since everybody is coming from a different background, different facts stand out to everybody, so I love listening to people and hearing what stands out to them. I could definitely go through and tell you what I think is the coolest fact on each panel. Like for the then and now, I just had no idea that there was a refuse pile underneath the park and that it affects everything. That was really crazy for me to learn.
Maybe that's the question for the event,
Mhm.
like, what was the thing you found most interesting on each slide? I don't know, you know, right?
Mhm.
To your point.
And the geology one, I didn't even know until I went and read a book about it. There actually used to be a third tectonic plate in between the two that we have now, forming the San Andreas Fault, and the ancient seafloor is what makes up most of Mount Tamalpais, as it was kind of scraped off of that Farallon plate onto the North American plate. So an ancient seabed from land that doesn't exist anymore is Mount Tamalpais. And I love the tides one because I think that a lot of people know that marshes are unique, but they're not entirely certain why they're unique, and it is all driven by that interaction of fresh and salt water driven by the tides of the ocean. Although I did sneak in a local celebrity, the great egret, that can often be seen at the specific request.
They're always out there.
Yeah, they're always out there.
Great.
Thank you.
And I think my favorite on the biodiversity one is the western terrestrial garter snake. There are a lot of garter snake species in California, and they are very regionally specific. So I enjoyed hiding him a little bit in the water plants there.
I'd like him to stay.
I'd like him to stay there too.
And then I already mentioned it, the dusky footed wood rat is a very endangered endemic, which means found only in California species, which relies on saltwater marshes as their habitat.
Huh.
And somebody has recorded seeing them in Puerto Madera Marsh.
Yeah.
Yes, I have just a couple comments. I really like it. It's easy to envision seeing this in the park. It seems very appropriate. I like the composition. I like the drawings. The only thing I wonder about is the content.
Mhm.
And I don't think any of us commissioners here have the background, the scientific, historical expertise to comment on all the information that he presented in these on these plates. I think, yeah, I'm sure you did a fine job, but I think before we move forward, I think it'd be a good idea to have, if we could find someone who could review this, just to make sure that all the information is correct, you know, we didn't mess up anything before we go ahead and start making these, you know, the final camera ready art, or get into the point of actually producing, you know, the boards. I don't know if anyone else feels the same way, but I just think it'd be a good idea to have someone just, hey, I know
That's what
my
I was saying,
history,
like, is there
I
a
know my
science
science.
Professor or something, just to cover you too, like, that's where I was going with this, like, I couldn't tell you. And I might know some of this, but I'm certainly not gonna put my name and say, yep, it's all correct. Because I'm definitely not that smart. So should we have a professor of science, I don't know who that is.
Yeah,
Right.
Redwood High School down the road.
Yeah, there's
We've
just,
got
there's
Colin Moran
just
over there.
history
It's just a
teacher.
matter of timing and.
But then you have to say,
Yeah.
does somebody wanna be the signature that they've signed off that this is correct? Yeah, like that, I don't doubt it, because clearly you just rattled off some impressive information that I wouldn't have known. That I would imagine none of us up here knew either. You did your research, but I also think I'd like to protect you. Should someone come back and say, you know what, that date's off, or, and then, you know, people are mean. I'd rather protect you.
We can look at doing something like that. One of the fun stories that I was gonna tell you about working with Emma, we kept asking her to put things in these, and she kept pushing back on information that wasn't correct. One of the, I don't know if I wanna say this in a public meeting, but one of the things that we asked was to include the sleeping lady
Yep.
in the Mount Tam lore, which we had attributed, or always heard that it was a Miwok saying, and that turns out that is actually not true. And so Emma was able to kind of put back on that information for us, and so we decided to leave that off, as that was more of a Western settler term that came about in the 1800s. So yeah, so if that's the way the commission goes, we can look into
Commissioner Sunshine's right, I think there's a high school with professor and teachers down the street who, like I said,
It could be a couple of different.
I have no doubt that you did the research and did this, but
Another set of eyes on it, just to make sure we don't have any factual errors.
that's what
I
I was
think-
saying,
yeah.
that you backed me up on this, like, that's.
Yeah, I definitely don't have any objections to that. I feel particularly confident about the biological information. I do have a degree in ecology, evolution, and biodiversity. And all of the history stuff, except for, of course, the date of the gold rush, which I did just look up what that is from the published book, but I have no objections if you guys want to have a second pair of eyes on it.
I would be in favor of that. If we can find somebody that can quickly give it, you know, cursory review.
Is that a consensus of the commission to
I just feel like it's due diligence.
do the due diligence just to confirm it? And Nick, we can do that.
yeah, we can do that.
Do you need something from us to do that?
No, just your feedback right there is good
Yeah.
enough. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then of course, that, you know, we are trying to push the project. It's just, if there was any design stuff that you also wanted to talk about, now would still be the time to.
No, I think from a design standpoint, they're all
You're gonna
lovely.
change the measure and the logo, right?
Yeah,
That's the only thing, and you already called that out.
I mean, I look forward to seeing it in color and with the font that you selected and all that, but I think that it's, generally speaking, like the overall composition is great.
Okay, thank you.
Have we predetermined the locations?
We have marked them off, around the path at Piper Park where we're thinking each one, would go, and that would come in the next presentation. Maybe the next presentation as we get closer to installation.
Great,
Can I make one more?
absolutely.
Because you just mentioned the Measure A, which I think is brilliant to add in there. I'm not quite sure if is this an established logo that Larkspur uses when we use Measure A funding, or Measure A was the county, right? The county part?
Yes, sales tax.
Seems like we've seen other icons.
I'm just,
We, Rita
it just doesn't
has,
said, tell me what it is, like either, I just want to see your tax dollars at work or Marin County Measure A or whatever.
There-
Treasury funds at work or something,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, so should we make sure that it's consistent wherever? it's-
yes, actually, Rita has gotten the correct, did she send you the Measure A logo? That's the one that she sent you.
Yes, I
Yeah.
believe that, we need to work on getting a larger file size, but, that is.
Yes,
The
We're gonna put it
logo
on
she
the-
was
You
sent.
know, people may not understand
Credit
that AIM
No.
Yeah.
funded by.
Marin County
Yeah,
Parks.
yeah.
yeah, there is branding that goes along with that, and this is it, but there are sizes that it's supposed to be in relative to, recommended sizes.
So smart to put it in there. I mean, I think it's,
Yeah.
I wouldn't even have thought that, but it just, if you're gonna put it in there, we should make sure it's recognizable.
Totally.
Yes. Sorry, I'm trying to.
Anything else? I think it's fabulous. I think the amount of information is terrific,
Excited to see
and
them.
it will be another really, nice asset for Piper Park. Thank you.
So cool.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. All right, well, if there's nothing else, we will move on with the agenda. Item 5 is the director's oral report.
Thank you. Very short report tonight. I wanted to remind everybody about the joint council meeting on March 5th. I believe most of you gotten back to me with time, so I have an idea of who to expect. And this is something that I believe council's trying to do once a year so that we can have that that continuity. So I'm excited about it. Another exciting thing that happened this year is, you all know about our community garden and the 70 plots out there. We had this year 11 plots turnover due to people moving out of the area and just, giving up their plots. So it's very unheard of to get this many. I think over the last few years, it's been 6 or 7. So we have a wait list right now that is about 5 years long. So these are, again, the people that put themselves on during COVID. When COVID was just starting, they put themselves on the community garden wait list, and I'm just now reaching out to them, filling these plots. So we're gonna get through a big chunk of waitlisters this year, which I'm excited about. And it brings a lot of energy into the garden, a lot of work for our volunteer, Stephen Connor, who oversees everything, explaining all the rules and everything that goes along with that. But it'll be a great year. And March 22nd is the garden work day. So twice a year, the gardeners get together for a potluck and they knock out tasks in the garden. So it's for the most part a self-contained garden. So they lay their mulch down in common areas, they paint the shed, they paint the tools, do upkeep, they put gravel down on the pathways. And I think it really, doing one in March kind of really kicks everybody off on the right foot. And then they do one again in October to shut down the garden and winterize the garden. So it's a good, truly a good community feel. So I'd like to just say, if you guys anybody ever wanted a tour of the community garden, I could set that up with Stephen or myself. So. Yeah. And that is all I have. Otherwise, it's just spring is coming up, and so everything is just about to start. So it seems like today we got the early dose of spring. So it's a wake-up call to be ready. So
And no damage to the parks, due to the rains we've had over the last month?
no major damage that we've seen. Typically during rainstorms, you're right, we'll see trees down in Piper Park especially. We've seen some pretty massive trees go down over the last few years, but nothing this year. Yeah,
That's great news.
yeah.
Any news on you getting your?
Thank you.
counterpart, Your assistant?
Yes,
Job title.
Erica Carty just started as a HR analyst working for us, and she started this this week and just opened up the position again for hiring. So we're advertising that position this week and looking to hire a rec coordinator, looking for the first round of interviews in late March.
Anything else? Okay. I want you to know, I'm already hearing from people that are very excited about getting the call for a plot.
Oh, really?
Yeah, people who thought they would not ever hear, and they are very excited. So you're right, there's gonna be a lot of new energy appears if the people that I've talked to are any example.
Good. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, that wait list is brutal because it's,
Yeah.
I mean, you get a number, but you can't really define what, number 32 on a list is, but it's, when you tell people 5 years, it's kind of
Yeah.
so some people might only be waiting 3, we'll see.
Okay, any reports from the commissioners? Anything?
I have one.
Okay, great.
I'm just gonna say that, I saw the announcement of the Battle of the Dad Bands, which I
Mhm.
believe is happening in Piper Park.
Yes,
It's not a Parks and Rec, program,
correct.
but it is being held in our parks, and I'm excited about that. But Funk Nugget, who played as part of our summer series, is the first announced band that's gonna be playing in the Battle of the Dad Bands.
Here, Dick.
So, Uh,
June 7th,
June.
Saturday, June 7th, yeah.
come one, come on,
A lot of time to practice. Great,
and that's all I got.
okay. Well, in
Well,
that case,
before you do that, then if you're gonna say that, we should announce the start of Music in the Park then.
So I guess we'll have to do all the events before Music in the Park too. Okay. You were almost out of here. I'll start throwing out dates right now. So we'll start, events are gonna start a little bit late this year because of, it's just a little bit late. So we're doing our spring egg hunt. We're gonna be doing the flashlight egg hunt Friday, April 18th. This year, we're gonna do the entire grass area of Piper Park. Typically, we've sequestered everybody in the picnic area, and it's just always kind of felt too crowded, and it keeps growing and growing. So we're just gonna do the park this year. So I'm excited for that one. That one's just chaos. So if you can make it, April 18th, 8:30 is when the whistle will blow. The following morning at Town Park, we're gonna be doing our Twin Cities spring egg hunt, which is in the daytime, like normal people, and that'll be 10 a.m. at Town Park and
Traditional people.
additional. And then after that, May 23rd, we kick off our Music in the Park series on Friday night at Piper Park, and I'm still working on getting bands together, but you mentioned Funk Nugget, and one of the Michaels has already reached out to me, and so I think we've penciled in a date for late June for Funk Nugget to come out and potentially close out the series. So it would be Fridays from May 23rd to the end of June, with the exception of the Friday before June 6th, which is the day before Battle of the Dad Bands.
So are there more dates this year than last, or the same? or-
There's gonna be one more date this year, I think.
Same amount of dates, but
Okay.
it's great because we're not gonna have it the Friday of Dad Band weekend.
Yeah, so it'll be. Should know this. 5 dates, I think, this year, yeah. That's like in October, yeah. Pumpkin patch will happen again, but that's so far out, so.
We need lots more help, because those pumpkins are heavy.
Heavy pumpkins. Good, that is all I have.
Those are the events, the dates, mark your calendars.
Yes,
Okay, great. Well, with that, entertain a motion to adjourn. Someone, somehow,
I'll make a motion.
sure, great. Give a second.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
We didn't get a update on the library though.
Oh, sorry, are you, is the owl off? Yes,
I
don't have the, I wasn't asked, the owl's off.
no, we're still going, we're still.
Off the record, right, because we're adjourned.
Adjourn.
The link is up on the website, right, Sharon? They can watch